Those in favour, those against, carried unanimously. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? There are no declarations of interest. Thank you. I see from the emptiness of the seats that there is no public forum, I assume. You're not aware of anyone wanting to speak? Okay. There's no public forum. We will now move on to item 5, page 6 of your agendas, which are the minutes of the open minutes of the Finance Committee on the 4th of July 2017. Are there any questions? Oh, James. Okay. So there are no concerns or questions. Okay. Councillor Casson, seconded Councillor Bunting. Those in favour, those against, carried. Thank you. Item 6, the 10-year plan monitoring report, which is on page 12 of our agendas. Tracy, are there already?
So good morning, everyone. As the Chair just mentioned, I'm presenting to you today the 10-year monitoring report for the full year ended June 2017. Just to note, these results are currently being audited by Audit New Zealand and therefore are potentially subject to change, although I have not been made aware of any material changes required at this point, but the orders are here for another 2 weeks. So Council finishes our 2016 year with an operating surplus of $53.7 million. This is $42.6 million favourable to our annual budget. The items that largely contributed to this favourable variance are the unrealised gains from interest swaps at $17.4 million, our vested assets revenue, which came in at $14.2 million, revenue associated with our capital projects of $7.1 million, and we had a gain from our evaluation on our investment properties of $2.6 million. Other smaller variances can be found on page 23 of the agenda. Our Council's balancing the books measure ended the year with a surplus of $12 million. This was $9.4 million favourable to the annual budget. However, this measure did move a little bit unfavourably in the month of June. This was mainly due to increased expenditure in the areas of maintenance and professional costs. On page 19, we have the risks and opportunities schedule. The two updates for June are the addition of the PwC BAU versus growth project, which is also known as the financial strategy of the 180k. And we also updated the final depreciation number to reflect our actual number. In terms of debt, we finished the year with Council's total overall debt at $363 million, which is favourable to our year-to-date target by $41.4 million. The 12-month rolling debt to revenue ratio was 174%, which is below our annual target of the 198%. The total spend for capital expenditure for the 2016 year ended at $84.5 million. This was $21.3 million behind Council's restated year-to-date budget. On page 17 of the agenda, we have the list of the 30 projects with a value of $23.9 million that we are requiring approval today to be deferred from the 2016 financial year and carried into the 2017-18 financial year. The listing of these individual projects has not changed since the last report. However, they have been updated with their final values. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Tracy. We had a discussion offline previously, just on page 17, the replacement of the parking enforcement equipment. Just can you update us that? Are we relying on that for our free CBD parking?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's okay. So that was an issue because it is going to be done in time for the installation.
Yes, the work's underway now.
So this is telling us that it was going to. We expected it to be done by 30th of June 2017.
Yep.
It's going to be done before the rollout, which is October or Jeffish?
Yeah, sometime
Pardon?
there. October 1. Yeah.
Is the rollout?
Yep.
So that work, and you say the work is being done now, is it?
The work is underway, yeah.
Oh, okay, thank you. Are there any more questions on the 10-year? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Tracy, for your report. In paragraph 5 on page 12, you mentioned that in the final part, and again from the increase in the value of Council's investment properties, $2.6 million. Is that a revaluation gain, or is it an improved revenue stream?
No, it's a revaluation gain. So once or every year in June, we revalue all of our buildings, our land and our investment properties.
Which includes the likes of this building and so
yes,
forth? Yep,
yes,
okay.
so that's what the revalue for the investment properties in particular, that's come through, and we only do it once a year in June.
So that's sort of like a debit assets because they've gone up in value and credit income.
Correct.
To record that. Thank you. In paragraph 11, where you talk about the deferred expenditure projects, you say in the last sentence the recommendation is the budget is carried forward. Is that the budget is carried forward to the 17-18 year? Is there anything in there in that 23.9 million which is unlikely to get unlikely in that it will not get started or finished during the 17-18 year?
No, so there's apart from the ones that are potentially reliant on third-party contracts.
Okay. So have any been signalled that because of that reason we're unlikely to finish them in this current year?
No.
No. Okay. And there's nothing that's been carried forward in that 23.9 million that relates to anything from a prior year?
No, not at that 23.9 million.
Okay,
no.
okay. So if at worst we're kind of only 1 year, the 23.9 million represents projects that were scheduled to start and hopefully finish during the 16-17 year.
Correct. Rather
than any earlier year, and there's nothing currently suggesting that those ones that have been deferred won't get finished in the 17-18 year.
No.
Okay. Just a follow on from that, in the staff recommendation under 3B, you've got you start 3B off as approves the deferral. Is it necessary that council approves it, or could we just record it, or could we use another word instead of approve? Or is it a requirement that we actually approve that deferral?
As far as I understand, I do need your approval to defer it through. So, because it adds to my budget that you've obviously already approved my annual plan budget for next year. I now need this approved to come forward to add to that budget.
So it actually adds to that budget?
That is correct.
So it adds to that budget.
Okay, so we can't use another word instead of approve?
Well, further to that, Rob,
A lighter word, perhaps?
I was going to say, that's the stuff that we have approved them to do in 2017, year into 2017.
Yes, but
So
I'm
now-
asking to defer the budget from this year into next year so that I can add it on to the budget that I need to spend for next year.
So we've got to acknowledge that it didn't occur in 17.
Correct.
And has to be rolled over, yeah.
Okay, no, I understand now. The word approved was used last time, so
Sure.
in order to move it into another year, we have to
Approve it again,
approve it
essentially.
or authorise it, or, okay.
Yeah, that's correct, because that would be over in addition to the existing CapEx budget we put forward at the annual plan.
Okay,
So-
which we put forward in the last annual plan.
Correct.
Yep, okay.
Excuse, can I just interrupt you there, Rob? So theoretically, if we didn't do that, those projects would just stop, would they? Would
Correct.
the CEO then lose authority to spend that money on those projects?
That's right.
Okay.
Okay, all right. No, I just wondered if we could use a word like authorise or record rather than approve, but if approve is the right... You can use celebrate.
I don't see too much of a difference. So if you want to use authorise it rather than approve, we're happy with that. But
Okay. Look, it's not a die in the ditch, but page 19, 60C. You mention in there as emerging issues the two known slips in River Road. And that additional slips have since resulted after periods of heavy rain. So we've got more than two slips along River Road at the moment?
Yes, as far as I know, they are still investigating that. So.
Okay, so do we have any idea as to what the potential costs will be to remedy the known ones and the new ones in terms of the cost to council?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just following on from the work, the briefing we had about 6 to 8 weeks ago on slips, we actually got around 4 that are current. We're still working through A, liability, and B, what the potential costs are, and once that becomes clear, we'll bring that back to the Finance Committee, but we don't have, I can't tell you that today. Okay. So we don't know whether they're substantial or minor or... the two new slip, I know the one I've seen the one at 917 River Road, which looks quite a substantial slip, but are the new ones that aren't identified here, are they major slips or are they minor in terms of the damage? My understanding is one is, the other one's probably more modest. When you say substantial, they are generally substantial when we have the larger ones along the river walkway, and potentially they could be from tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars to fix, but quite often there's cross-boundary issues which we have to work through first and with those landowners, and we have quite a bit of dialogue with them around that on who's going to do what. They're quite complex situations too. Quite often it may not be an engineering solution, it might be a planting solution or something like that. Okay, thank you. Just to see if there's anything more. I think I've covered off. Yes, that's all my questions. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Rob. Just following on some of Rob's stuff, would you mind just expanding, Tracy, on paragraph 38, the graph you've got, or not if it's a graph, it's a grid, or what do you call those things? Table, that's it, it's a table. Just what that shows?
Sure. So what we're just trying to do with this is, I guess, recut the annual budget to get some visibility around the sense that if you take out the recommended deferrals that we've obviously been talking about for the last few months and add those other couple of changes from our risks and opportunities schedule, that if you redid that and our actual expenditure, it actually equals the budget. So within the given plan that we had set out to do this year, taking aside the deferrals and other things that have happened, we pretty much met budget from a capital expenditure perspective.
Okay, so what you're saying is at paragraph 34, there's a figure 84.5 million.
Yes, and then
And
against,
that
if
is
you did
almost the same as
$84.5 million
83.7,
against
yeah.
a restated budget of
So what-
83.7, we slightly overspent for the
Okay, so
year.
you're saying that we budgeted to do 84.5?
No, 83.7. That's the restated budget, is the
okay,
83.7.
Okay. All right, so you're saying we did pretty much what we thought we were going to do. It was just different projects.
Correct.
A different bunch of projects that we thought. Yeah.
Correct.
And that probably wouldn't be that unreasonable, given that whilst we do budget for a number of capital projects, events happen through the time, and it's quite prudent to make some decisions to defer others or bring others forward, but stay within the envelope that's been approved.
Okay. Thank you. I see there are no more questions. All right. Are there any more questions? Okay. I will move the recommendation. Is that working now? That's working now, is it? Yep. Okay. All right, I'll remove the staff recommendation on page 12, paragraph 3. I'll move. James seconds. Those in favour? Those against? Carried unanimously. Do you want to be recorded as voting on that one, Paula? No. Okay. Okay, so you officially didn't turn up until after that was voted on, all right? Okay, thank you. Our next item is item 7, page 67, Key Projects Monitoring Report.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I'll introduce the report, take it as read. There have been no major changes since the writing of this report. Happy to take questions.
We're in trouble of finishing this meeting at 10 o'clock. I beg your pardon. David,
There's no chance of that.
you're going to put a stake in the ground, eh?
Yeah. David, excuse me, the Rotorua Town Centre, there's been some discussions in the last couple of days, just in terms of that key project, about the possibility of variances or variations in the siting of some of the council activities there. The library, the town square, the pool have all been mentioned. Are they, because does the plan lock them into exact positions, or is that something that can be moved depending on the final configuration of our financing and our partnerships and so forth?
Sure. You able to help, Mark?
This locks in the comprehensive development plan, which has the general outline there's different areas, and there's Area A, which is where the town centre is on the corner of Bourman Road and North City Road. So it locks in the high level footprint of things that you're alluding to, and where our land is, the land that we've purchased. What we do on that land and where we do it and how we do it and the location of actual buildings and things like that, it still allows us some flexibility to make decisions around what we want to do on those pieces of land in the future. We'd probably have to go through some resource consents. There's still resource consents after the CDP for that, once council makes, or if and when council makes some decisions. So I think we still have some flexibility in that. I'm no planning expert, but my understanding is that we do have some flexibility. It only does Area A. There's still Area P, and there's a couple of other areas as well which has to be worked through in the future. Our the parkland is outside of this part. It's actually in Area P, which is between this area and the school.
Yeah, to follow that up, I'm a little bit concerned.
Sorry, just one thing. Sorry, Dave. What's a CDP? Comprehensive Development Plan?
Comprehensive Development Plan, so,
Well done.
yeah, it's sort of like a mini structure plan.
Thank you.
I'm a little concerned that, for instance, let's say we did a deal with the Ministry of Education, if that's ever possible, on the Rotatuna pool, you know, a joint pool, but they didn't want it down in the town where we had sort of loose indicated in our CDP that it might be in the town centre. They wanted it up the other side of the playground. You know, are we going to be hammered by the community for putting it in a different place, or not, or have to go through more planning hoops than would normally be the case to do that? Likewise, a library, you know, I support all of the activities listed in the CDP that the council's to be involved in, but I think that there's much more discussion to be had over the exact place, because it depends on partners we can develop especially, and on funding we're willing to put into it.
Yeah, look, I'd have to come back to you, Councillor Dave, on that. I'd have to refer to Kelvin's team on that. I'm not a planning expert, but I can get that information and come back to you on that.
Maybe through the chair, if we could have that come somewhere where we can sort of have a look at what's possible, what's not, what the timelines and hoops are involved, because
yeah,
I just don't want us to lock ourselves into something that mightn't be the best answer in the near, you know, in a few months' time.
Yeah, so I can bring that information back. We'll be discussing some of those proposals that we went through in the briefing yesterday during the LTP, so I'll make sure that we either have it at a briefing or during the LTP committee meetings.
Thank you.
So, Lance, how does that differ from a comprehensive development plan, what you're just suggesting you'll bring back? Is that what you're saying? You'll bring back a completed comprehensive development plan?
What I'll bring back is essentially a summary of what's in the comprehensive development plan. What Councillor Dave asked for is what does that lock us into, and then if we wanted to do something different, then what's the process to do something different, and how much time is involved, how difficult that is, and how costly is that. But I do think we have some flexibility with the public land that we own with that.
So it's different facilities, different, all sorts of stuff. So some things will be relying on other things, won't they?
Yeah, so we've bought land for a park,
Yeah,
then we've bought land adjacent to the parkland for a swimming pool, and then there's a town square, and then there's a library. I think what Councillor Dave's saying, if we want to reconfigure the location of those particular facilities, so like if you want to have the pool up the school end of the park, then how easy is it to actually do that? Are we constraining ourselves with through the CDP? But I'll have to come back to you on that.
Okay, thank you. James?
Just on a different thing here, on attachment 2, Victoria on the River, it says here that...
Give us a page number?
What's page 70, sorry. The earthworks are 90% completed for VOTR, and the piling for boardwalks completed. Now, obviously, we had some concerns from one of the residents there, Mr. Murray Bindon, that we had a walk around. Is that concerning the piling behind his set of flats?
My understanding is yes, but I'm probably a month out of the loop, having been away, and I haven't spoken to Gina since then. But I know, talking to Maria Barry from Parks yesterday, there's been continuing discussions with those residents who came into the committee meeting 6 or 8 weeks ago.
Okay, all right. No, because I haven't heard back from Murray either, so... Yeah, so I'm just wondering whether he contacted council or not.
Just continuing discussion doesn't equal agreement or a position has been taken. So you're not suggesting there has been an answer devised yet, has there?
No, so,
okay.
and I think where we got to last time was when Mr Bindon came in, is that the staff would have a talk to him, and and we'd try and, you know, get the best outcome for both parties as much as possible. So I understand that from Maria yesterday that those discussions are continuing. I'd have to check whether or not any resolution's been reached.
Okay, thank you. Push a button, Martin. Martin.
Item 9, in the page 68, land procurement and the issue of the first rights, iwi first rights. Can you just quickly go back through that for us, please? What land exactly?
Through you, Mr Chair, so the comment relates to land required to build the Cobham Wairere Drive intersection. So it's principally land on the northern side of the river. So some of that land has first rights of refusal implications that we're working through.
So you say northern side, that's the Hamilton Garden side?
The Hamilton Garden side.
Where the, just adjacent to the cemetery where the trig station is?
Correct, yep.
So is our reserve at the moment?
There's a bit of a mixture.
Martin, just for the interest of people who people can't hear what you're saying on the TV, I think, if you're facing...
Right, massive, huge audience, high ratings at the moment. But go on, sorry, just help me exactly the area.
It's quite complicated because there is a mix of land which is and which isn't, subject to first rights obligations. But it's clearly the land on by the gardens adjacent to the cemetery on the northern side of the river as you move up to the east town belt.
Right, but is that all our reserve, or is it some other separate lots?
No,
does it all have our reserve status?
Correct.
So basically, it's the transfer from reserve status to transport corridor status. Is that the issue?
In simple terms, yes. So it's just a process that we need to work through, and we are working through it.
Right, and that's straightforward?
I wouldn't say it's straightforward. First rights can be complicated, but we have a process and we're working through it.
And what's the cost to the city?
Don't know that at this point in time.
You see, because the question I'm asking is, in this case, this is where, for a strategic plan which has been 20 years more, 30 in the making, we're just transferring our reserve, obviously, to transport and delineating, working out some other areas as well. But you're saying technically we still have to obviously go back through a first right of refusal process. So technically, the Tainui could refuse that, could they?
Yeah, look, but we're working through that process constructively.
Right, okay, thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Any further questions or debate? All right, I'll move that the Finance Committee receive the report. Councillor Mallet, seconded Taylor. Those in favour, those against, carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 8, page 71. 2015-25 11-year performance report. It is actually 11 years. Let's see if we can do maths. Shoot.
Thank you, Chair. I'll hand over to Jolie to introduce this report.
So this is the year-end Q4 10-year plan results for the 2016-17 year. These results are still subject to Audit New Zealand's review. And yeah, any questions about the results will be directed over to the GMs.
There are...
Yeah.
There are some results where there was no data available. Is it expected that data will be available by the time of the audit? Because I assume this is part of the financial audit, isn't it? Which we were told was going to be done in the next couple of months. 2 weeks. Or is there just not going to be data for some of those things?
For the founders measure, there won't be.
Say that again?
The founders measure, the founders theatre measure. And the other one, I'll let Sean explain.
Yeah, perhaps, Mr Chair, if I could speak to it. The other one with no data is item 51, which is to do with the growth of the visitor numbers to the region. That data comes out of the Department of Statistics and its time frame doesn't match with our reporting period, but it does get reported through to this committee via the Hamilton Waikato Tourism annual reports that it does to us. So they do catch up on the reporting, but it won't be in time.
Okay, thank you.
Mark.
Gary, I'm seeking pretty much anyone who can give us guidance really on item number 15 regards safer biking. Just noting here that we're trying to get a decreasing trend and we're monitoring that on how many people have died on the roads. Notwithstanding that, personally I think it should be 0. Can we actually say that we're achieving that when we haven't got to the end of the year anyway? I mean, should we be giving ourselves a green light because only 4 people have died on the roads on bikes before we get to the end of the year, or should we put a not achieved yet?
We have reached the end of this financial year.
Right.
So that's why it's green. We have met the target for this financial year.
Okay, so the target was 4 people dead.
The target was a decreasing trend.
Decreasing trend. Okay.
Yeah.
So at what stage can I have a crack at getting that altered, the language of that altered? I mean, this obviously isn't the forum to do that right now.
So, through you, Mr Chair, I guess we've started that process through the Access Hamilton strategy.
Yep.
You know, and council's put down a marker that we need to test as we land the 10-year plan.
Yep.
You know, that marker was 0, I think, in 10 years. So we need to test that as we work through the program of works and land it, and it'll then form the basis for the next 10-year plan. And I expect a totally different set of KPIs across a whole lot of our business, including that one.
Okay,
so you've started that process.
Yeah, so this is measured on last year's KPI,
Yes, this
right?
is, was set, you know, a couple of years ago for this 10-year plan period.
All right.
The work you're doing in Access Hamilton will set the KPIs for the next 10-year plan period. So you've started that work already.
Okay. Thank you. So the only way we can monitor whether we're investing in making biking safer is how many people die on the roads. Is that right? Or because I would have thought whether we've invested or not would be the KPI.
Can you just repeat the question, Mark?
So yeah, sorry. So the level of service is no. Forget I said that. Actually, I didn't read the next bit. That's all right. Thank you. I owe you all 5 seconds. Thanks.
That's why I couldn't understand the question.
That's right. Yeah, because I couldn't understand it myself. Sorry, guys. Thank you. All right. We'll wait till the 10-year plan. Thanks. Chris.
Paula.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I just got a couple of comments. One was relating to that, just we're going to pick up the new approach of council in any upcoming KPIs. KPIs for the new year will reflect where council currently sits with some of its aspirations, yeah.
For the 2018 10-year plan.
Yeah, that's right. So looking at some of the areas, and I know why they are the way they are, that have the red dots, I could make a couple of comments in the debate, but I'll just ask you a question in terms of, one of them is rubbish and recycling. Now that's...
Paula, could you just please give us the number of it? So people can go to it?
20, yeah, it's on page 75, it's 23 or 24. 24, I think.
24, okay,
There's a complete row of red lines, and it relates to the percentage of waste recovered.
Recycling and reuse.
Yeah.
Yep.
So would we expect, how soon would we expect KPIs that are consistent with our new waste management approach, our plan that we've got in place, and potentially the new waste contract? How soon would we expect to see those reflected? Because obviously we didn't meet the last KPIs at all. It's just a complete row of red. So what's the step to get that, I mean, that's not satisfactory. So where do we go from here?
So, through you, Mr Chair, again. So once again, this will be very dependent on the waste service that you choose over the coming months. You know, through the waste task force that we've got going, the contract that we've got out, the business case we put for council gave a range of different service options with an anticipated range of diversion rates. So we're very much dependent on the service that you finally choose. The preferred service that council nominated, it had a diversion rate from memory somewhere around 50% or something like that. So if you chose that service, we could expect it would be somewhere around that, and through the next 10-year plan would set an appropriate target dependent on the service that you chose.
Okay, so some of these things will go into the next year's KPIs because they're ready, and others which are subject to LTP long-term plan discussions won't be picked up in next year's KPIs, but they'll be picked up after. There'll be a bit of a lag, won't there?
So everything in here relates to the 2015 10-year plan.
Yeah.
So these measures, so the current year we're in, so
yeah.
until June next year,
yeah.
These will be the same measures for the remainder of this financial year, so for the next 11 months.
Yeah.
the 2018 10-year plan, so starting from July next year, that's when all of these we can reset and change any or all of these, the ones that aren't legislatively required of us, so that will all be part of the 2018 10-year plan.
Okay, and we'd expect to set consistent KPIs with the direction of council at that time.
Absolutely.
Right, because obviously this tells us something that we're not, about how we're working currently, and we need to address this. Where there's a red dot, you need to address it in some way. Can't continue to have red dots. The second question is the number 55, which relates to the city safety. That'd be the same thing. That would be once the work around the review of City Safe and all of that has gone ahead, we should be able to create a measurement that works, because clearly this is just telling us we're not doing what we said we'd do.
So,
is that 55?
Yeah, 55. First one under safety.
that's a green light. That's saying that we have achieved.
Oh, of course, in the quarter. So it was a slow start, and we got to the. That's what you're saying. It was
That survey is taken annually.
Oh, okay.
So I think it was static. The result was static between last year and that Q3 one this year. And then when it was taken again, it did increase. So it was red in those first 3 quarters because of the static result. Yeah.
Okay, so that's an interesting way to record it then. If you're having an annual survey and you've got 3 static, it's not really very accurate way of, until you get to the end point, you're not going to know where you are with an annual report, right? If you're not measuring every quarter, then the dots being red, do you know what I mean? Maybe they should just be blank, given it's an annual survey.
Should be no data for the first 3.
Or something like that, because it suggests there was data and we were not meeting the standard. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable point.
My other question is just in terms of the same thing with the timely and open access to the public information.
What number is that?
Oh, sorry, last one, 63. We did get there again in the last quarter. Is that because we only collate the data in the last quarter, or was it that we were not performing to the KPI in the first 3 quarters, and then all of a sudden we had a great quarter?
That's because each quarter, the quarters 1 to 3, there were some official information requests that were responded to late, and then Q4 all were responded to on time. But the year-to-date, the year-end result is off track because of those missed requests in quarters 1 to 3.
So the unfortunate, if I can help out there too, the unfortunate thing with those lagoimas is that if you are half a day late, it shows red. There's no, and so in terms of the writing of the KPI, we need to be very, very careful about making sure that the signals that we're trying to show you are accurate. So, and I know that there are a number of them that were just 1 day late of the 20 because of the significant amount of information required from council.
I remember we had a conversation around the commentary box being able to identify what some of the reasons for these being.
Sure.
I don't think the commentary box is as useful as it could be, but we had that conversation prior and you took that on board. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Paula. Siggy, sorry.
That's okay, I can live with that. Well, just a couple of things that stood out for me, and that's in M4 and M5 on page 73. It's just that the level of service was decreased because of staff absences due illness, and I've talked about that before, whether some of the measures we do help with getting staff healthier.
Sorry, Siggy, which one are you looking at?
M4 and M5 on
Council
page
will provide
73.
a quality service.
Yeah.
Okay, so somewhere that talks about illness, is it? Okay, all right.
That just stood out for me, that due to staff illness. So that is quite a major challenge?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think the The result was probably more dominated by some of the weather events we had in the last quarter. So it's been a really busy time for us with the amount of rain and the flooding we've had. So look, we haven't been able to keep up with it. So look, we'll be looking to address that through the 10-year plan and our resourcing levels, but it's always a challenge. You know, we could put lots of resources in and get green, but is that the most efficient use of our resources? So it is a challenge when we get a lot of successive events, you know, when everything's all saturated and then we get another rain event, so it does stretch us. And if you look at that, you can see in that fourth quarter, that's where we've had some troubles. We try and supplement it with contract resource, but it is a challenge that we just got to deal with.
Thank you. Thank you. That's it.
So, Chris, are the staff dealing with their water getting sick, are they? Because they're dealing with their water?
No, I think we like.
No, I'm only joking.
Okay, I'll sit down.
Jeff?
Flu season, all of that, you have high absence rates.
Just hope you're not coughing over the water,
And,
right?
yeah, I'm very viral today, so I'm keeping right away from all my colleagues. But obviously that's a factor with any organisation, and I guess that's a hard one to predict as well.
Yeah, it is. Jeff?
Thanks, Gary. Page 76, number 42. I may have missed this somewhere along the line in a briefing, but can someone remind me why the museum is failing to hit targets, or was failing to hit targets consistently in terms of visits from students and children? There's 3 red dots there in a row. I'm just trying to recall if we've been told about this. Or
Yeah, Councillor Jeff, they're quite reliant on the blockbuster exhibitions we have, which are linked into the curriculum. So what I've asked Sheree to do is to actually try and spread when we have the blockbusters so that we don't have, you know, a quiet quarter and that sort of thing. Quarters 1 and 2, no, the ones at this, when there's school holidays,
I see.
they're quite quiet because of the holiday period, and it takes a couple of months for schools to get up to scratch, and then in the last quarter of the calendar year, which is probably the second quarter of the financial year, schools start winding down and we get lesser numbers. But if we have a blockbuster, which Permian Monsters, anything to do with dinosaurs and things like the Da Vinci type, the innovation type exhibitions we've had, they hit a number of different curricula. So it's more attractive for the schools to come and hit 3 curricular activities in one day, especially if they're travelling from afar, like from different parts of the Waikato.
It rings a bell now.
It is always a bit lumpy, the results there.
Yeah.
We're a little bit disappointed with the results overall. We were hoping to hit the 8,000, and we've generally done that each year, but we're looking at how we can actually spread that better going forward.
Thanks, Lance. I remember now.
I see an empty request list. I assume no one has any more questions. All right, I'll move the staff recommendation. Can I have a seconder, please? Mallet, Taylor. Those in favour, those against. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, item number 9, page 79, which is the Waikato Regional Airport. Review of Director remuneration and terms of appointment. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Chairman. Look, I would just have a couple of brief comments, if I may, to introduce the paper. Just a reminder that, as you will have read, this is the first time the remuneration schedules for directors at the Waikato Regional Airport would have been reviewed since 2007. There have been discussions over a number of years that I've been involved with the airport about timeliness of a review, and given the trajectory of the business at the moment, the directors feel comfortable that it would be appropriate to review the rates. Hopefully the paper attached from Ernst Young that we commissioned to look at the schedule of rates is reasonably self-explanatory, and obviously the airport company or the board have indicated that they'll be looking to go to mid-range. To give you an example, these the range that's put forward for the directors is very similar to that of Whipple. Whipple has a slightly similar, different structure on it. Sorry, Whipple is Waikato Innovation Park, which is also a similar CCO. Also, to let you know that the other shareholding councils are also looking at this matter at the same time as us, and today Waipa will be, District Council will be, management are putting forward a similar proposal to my own to you, which is in the positive. Matamata Piaka have already approved the Mayor and CE to vote favourably for the increase, and the Waikato District Council will be discussing it on the 23rd of August. So the train is in motion with the other shareholders. We've heard nothing back from Aotearoa at this stage, so happy to take any questions you may have. Jeff.
Thank you, Gary. Sean, it just strikes me as curious that we haven't reviewed their remuneration for 10 years. Is it a similar thing with other boards of our other CCOs? I mean, do we not have a kind of set thing where, I mean, I'm not anxious to, obviously, to be doing it all the time, but it just strikes me as curious that 10 years has gone by and we haven't.
Yeah, look, I think you have every right to be curious. I think it's probably not appropriate that it's been held off for this long, but as you're aware, the airport has gone through a number of challenges over the last 10 years, and I feel the board, or the respective boards over that period, have felt that given the circumstances it hasn't been necessarily appropriate to ask for a review. So that's been very much their call.
And what would be the situation with our other CCOs?
Similar, although Waikato Innovation Park, look, I'm a little bit out of date on that, but we did review their rates a wee while ago, and they were a bit short, I know, but I don't think anything's happened on that because of the current sale process that's being considered.
I guess I just raise it because, you know, we're anxious to get the best people.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
One thing, if I may, Mr Chair, that I failed to just mention was the recommendation that's also in the paper for a slight adjustment to the shareholder constitution, which to do with the appointment of directors. At the moment, it's very open-ended. Directors
terms, you mean?
In terms of the number of terms, and the chairman has, and I have been discussing this, and we're really trying to standardise to the norm of there being, you know, 3-year terms for directors and a maximum opportunity for 2 consecutive terms. That takes away a lot of ambiguity about renewals and rollovers and everything else, and it ensures that you have a degree of refresh taking place on the boards.
I've got Martin.
Oh, it was just a follow-up from that. I just wondered if I could just add one more to it.
Right, yep.
With the chair's whatever discretion. Thank you. It was just, would it be possible to get for this meeting at some stage in the future a bit of a rundown of where we're at with other boards in terms of their remuneration, how long since it's been reviewed, just that type of stuff, a bit of a housekeeping thing?
Yep.
Good.
Yep. Sean said yep, so I'll say yep.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Martin.
Yeah, it'd be useful to have some, you know, I don't want to put you to extra work, broad brush comparators. And I guess in this case, while it's a CCO, this is sort of roughly trying to get some measurement with the private sector. Is that correct, for equivalent enterprise in the private sector?
Well, yes, it's a mix though. The work that Ernst Young did looked at similar infrastructure type businesses, CCOs.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a mix of the two, without a doubt. But it is definitely, their recommendation is coming in on market rate.
Yeah, and obviously, clearly, we're purchasing a skill set, which individuals, not just their time, but their intellectual capacity.
Absolutely.
And the only other comment I would make is that I think we're in a much better space now in terms of how we appoint our directors. It's not a sort of old boys club of who knows who anymore. It's a really good, robust process. And can we just ensure, or perhaps a message to the company, that we try and do the incremental approach in future? You know, I mean, obviously, it's just one of those oversights, and these things never are good.
What's that mean, Martin?
Well, it means that you do an annual review, just like any other sector, be it any other company, any other sector. You just, you know, you annualise. It might be a cost of living adjustment or whatever, or a market assessment once every couple of years. But I think this is, it's unfortunate that we do nothing for 10 years and then we have this sort of big bump. That's all. I'm not quibbling over the recommendations.
Sean, you might, well, I was just going to ask, the Constitution probably says something about that. And also we have the mechanism of the statement of expectations and all that sort of stuff, which is how we got them. So, it's gone. Sorry, Sean.
Well, that's correct, Chair. We do review the business annually through this committee in terms of the annual report that is put forward and also their statement of intent that comes through. It is part of the responsibility of the board itself, however, to make recommendations as to its fees. And so in this instance, for example, the Chair is giving us an early heads up that they expect that the annual general meeting of the company that's going to come up, that they may wish to put this vote. And because obviously of our own policies in this matter, we need to bring that to this committee in advance.
Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Rob.
Thanks, Chair. My understanding under the Companies Act, it's the shareholders who approve the directors' fees.
Correct.
Do you think it's appropriate that the airport would go and engage Ernst & Young or anyone to do this report without, given the requirements of the Companies Act, that it would be a shareholder initiation process rather than the director or the company process of engaging this independent report?
Oh, look, I apologise if it wasn't clear. I actually engaged Ernst Young to do this, not the board.
But that's not what Ernst & Young say in their report.
I had a discussion with the chair, and I agreed that I would do get an independent report done.
But on page 1 of their report, they say Waikato Regional Airport Limited. This is on our page 133. Waikato Regional Airport Limited has engaged Ernst & Young to provide market data.
Yeah, I've never picked that up, but it is incorrect.
Okay.
Quite incorrect.
Okay. So we have followed what you think is what I think is the appropriate process here.
Yes, I have.
Yep. Thank you.
Mark.
Thank you. Quite a simple one. So the financial implications to us as a council are nil, right? So we're just saying we just have to give them the permission to change their fee structure?
Yeah, the cost is directly to the company.
Okay. Do you think it's likely that we're going to be hit up for a different fee next year?
I think it's unlikely. I suspect most companies, in circumstances, would be probably every 3 years, but I can't imagine it. They certainly have not indicated to me an ongoing review at all. So I don't expect that would be the case. But if they did, once again, that's subject to shareholder vote. And so, I don't expect they would.
So just so I'm clear in my mind, though, this is different to us giving someone in our employer pay rise.
Correct.
Correct. Okay, thank you.
Dave.
Yes, thanks. Sean, in the current economic climate, do you think a rise of 29.3% for all parties is justified?
If you annualise it, no. But if you look at the fact that it hasn't been reviewed for over 10 years, and I would expect that if there had been more frequent reviews, say maybe a review every 3 years, we probably still would have come to this number that we're at today.
And you said the cost, or in answer to Councillor Ubuntu, that the cost was not ours, but we are 50% shareholders.
Correct.
And indirectly we wear that cost, don't we, one way or another?
Yeah, in terms of how it impacts on the balance sheet, yes.
Yep, thanks. And the 10 years in which there hasn't been an increase, what's been the change in passenger throughput in that organisation? Because I would have thought pay rise like this would have had some reference to productivity.
Look, I can't quote the numbers specifically right now, but in the 10 years they've been quite volatile. They've been sort of up and down, and now they're up again. We have quite strong growth out of the airport in terms of passenger numbers. However, I would stress that the airport company, whilst it is primarily an aviation business and an airport business, the core of the business is very much property management. And so if you look at the value on the balance sheet of the property management, the the scale and size of some of the transactions that they're involved, the strategic work they're having to do in terms of managing the property and future-proof is actually quite a bit bigger than the aviation activity itself. So the takeoff and landings at the airport company, yes, they're important, but they are not by any means the major chunk of what the business is about.
In that 10 years, we've lost our international flights business, haven't we?
Correct.
Okay. So you still think it's justified that they get this sort of increase, even though one of the major planks, if you like, in the airport company's development about 20 years ago was to move into the international market?
Yes, I do still think it's warranted. The international market situation is the airport company can do so much to influence that, but then there are a lot of other factors at play that are totally out of the airport company's control in terms of securing international
Can I just add a little bit of context too? We have, we as in the Hamilton City Council, has specifically asked the board of directors of the airport company not to focus on international stuff and to grow their domestic business. So they have, in effect, done what we have asked them to do.
That's because there wouldn't have been any use asking them to grow the international business, isn't it?
Probably right. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So there had been. So what we had asked them to do was be cautious, be conservative, and they've done to a T almost what we've asked them to do.
Sorry, I thought I was getting the report from the general manager, but that's all right. The land that they're selling and so forth, part of Innovation Park, sorry, they are selling it, they're not leasing it?
Oh, there's a mixture. They have quite a mixed land portfolio that they're working on, some of which they have acquired out of the former property joint venture, some of which is tagged for to be leasehold land in the long term, and some of which they will sell. But once again, they
will or have sold, Sean?
There has been some sales, but I don't know that, can't give you the detail of that. But they have sold some, but they have earmarked further land for sale, but they've also earmarked a lot of land for long-term hold and for lease activity. So it's a mixed portfolio that they're operating.
Lease for airside activity and sale for commercial manufacturing activity?
Definitely lease for airside activity, but some land that is not airside, they are definitely put a hold on it to continue to own it. So it's not all land that's out for sale there, in fact, quite the opposite.
But as the time develops and land is sold, the portfolio size would therefore reduce, wouldn't it?
Not necessarily. Once again, it comes back to how they manage the total portfolio and whether there's improvements on the land that they hold that the airport company own. They've also had, from their reports to us, the evaluations of their property continue to increase at this stage. But I don't know that I can answer a lot of the detail of those sorts of questions here. That is really for the board to talk to when they report each year to you, and they have done.
So we're being asked for to authorise an increase in directors' fees without having a report from the company, just a request from the company for the extra. And it's not related to, we don't have any information in front of us on their productivity changes, their workload changes.
Well, we have had reports from, which is part of the annual schedule of update reports from the company, so they have been upheld and continue to happen. So the purpose of this paper wasn't to report on the business. The purpose was of this paper was to respond.
That's right, but if you're asking for more money for doing a job, one would expect a diligent set of group of people that were being asked to authorise that would want to know, is the business growing or reducing? I mean, and think of its name, Hamilton Airport, or Waikato Airport, whatever it's called. I would like to know, for instance, whether the air movements and the passenger movements and things like that had increased in the 10 years or gone down. I'm pretty sure that they've gone down, but I don't have that information in front of me.
The air movements to the chair have increased, but passenger movements have adjusted, obviously, with the exit a number of years ago now, of the international services, and also more recently the services between Hamilton and Auckland. However, Other services, the passenger numbers have increased quite substantially and continue to do so. So it's a mixed bag. It's a mixed portfolio, but.
The Hamilton to Auckland is not the only, for instance, Air New Zealand Origin service that's been lost, is it? And in that time, there's services to Nelson.
Yeah, but the capacity overall has, outside of the loss of those specific routes, has increased.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Dave. Paula?
Just a couple of, I think some of the questions have partly been answered. I was going to say, when is the next report to us from the board?
It will be, I think, around October from memory, but I don't have that to hand, but I will need to check that.
Okay, I'm interested in that. I noticed in the recommendation they were going, one of them one is median, one's slightly below. What do you know why they decided the chair was to be slightly below the median
Look,
mark?
I discussed the report with the chair because obviously he will be putting the ultimate recommendation to shareholders at their annual general meeting, and he felt that was probably an appropriate level for the chair's position. He was comfortable with that.
According to the chart, the way I was reading it, maybe I read it wrong, was that the recommendation is 45 and 30. 30 is the median for director, and 50 is the median for chair, right? That's what I read.
Yep.
That's what I was commenting on, Dave. The other question is, I read the report and looked at the market data at the back. What would help us, I think, as a council going forward, is to have some understandings about the pay scales for government boards, because there's private sector, there's local government sector, there's charitable sector, whose most boards get nothing, and then there's government runs a number of boards, and I know that their pay scales vary from 20,000 per annum up to 60 or 70,000 per annum, depending on the scale and worth. So understanding that would be useful.
Yeah, I think that, look, this report very much takes into account the scale of the business and the nature of the business. So it benchmarks against that, and they will have looked at some central government fees. So you were absolutely quite right. So government fees do range quite dramatically.
They do.
From, it could be 12,000, and I know of some that are up at 80,000. Yep. So it depends, once again, very much on the size and scale of the operation, and I asked Ernst Young to take particular care to that.
I think it also depends, doesn't it? So I'd like a little bit more background on some of the pay scales that they used. I mean, they probably have it sitting behind this report, but that would be helpful. And I know that the other factor that's considered, not only the pay scales and the relativities, and we've had a lot of conversation about that sort of thing recently, but also the level of experience of the directors and board members that you're seeking will affect, if you're getting an entry-level director versus a more competent, experienced director or not.
Well, not necessarily, because the directors' fees are set by the shareholders.
But they're not likely to be appointed, are they?
But when the appointment process that we go through, and we do have a CCO appointments policy, any director that's appointed has to fall within the guidelines of those directors' fees that are set. That's right. It's not a variable situation where we say, hey, that candidate is better than that one, so we'll pay them a bit more.
No, that's not
They have to fit totally within the fees that are set. But just as a reminder, in terms you asked about the calibre, I mean, when the current board of the airport company was recruited in, we worked through a professional search firm. We went through quite a bit of rigour, and these people did come through to you to council, or the previous council, for approval with a lot of the backup information as to the quality and calibre of their capability for a board of this nature. So there is a rigorous process that we now have in place. The same with Waikato Innovation Park. I'm not involved directly anymore, but certainly the last director that we appointed, we went through quite a rigorous
so there is a connection.
Process.
It's not a direct connection. There is a connection.
Yeah, and I'll be fair, not with the case of the airport company, but with the last recruitment on one of the CCOs, there was a lot of discussion about the director fees, and there were some candidates who were uncomfortable that they were too low for the amount of risk and responsibility that they were taking on. So, and I'm not advocating fees should go up, but it does become an issue.
It's an interesting conversation because they do take on a lot of liability and risk, don't they, with the new rules, and especially around things even like health and safety, and more the risk is put on the individual directors. Okay. It's just not one of those black and white issues, is it?
Just, Paula, just for your own information, the terms of reference of this committee is the appointment and remuneration of directors and CCO. So we yay or nay any appointments, so they do come through here.
I know, I was just making a point that where you set your level reflects who you're trying to attract into that role, the skill set, you know, isn't it?
Yep.
Skills and experience.
Mark. Thank you.
And starting to hint towards where I want to go with the answer to one of those questions before. So we've got John Spencer as the chair.
Correct.
The other directors, we've got Margaret Devlin.
Margaret Devlin, Annabelle...
Carlos de Silva. Sorry.
Carlos de Silva and
Annabelle
Margaret Devlin.
Cotton.
Right, so we've got some pretty good directors in there.
Very much so.
Right. So are they saying we won't carry on unless it gets better, or is it hard to find directors?
No, not at all. No,
Right.
no, they're not saying that at all, but they are saying it's probably fair and reasonable.
Okay. So has it become an issue that it's tough to get directors because of because of the fee structure, or I know they may be grumbling a bit, of course, but
they're not grumbling. No one's grumbled. Look, in this environment, what do I say? In the appointment process we went through for the existing round of directors that we have, there were two things that came through.
Yeah.
Three things. I'll add another. I'll give you a fourth shortly. But one was the level of fees. There were some people that felt that they would not entertain the idea of the board because of the fee level, and it's for the reasons I stated earlier on.
Especially if they live out of town.
That's correct. And there was the other thing that did come through quite strong, that there were some people that actually felt that it wasn't necessarily a directorship they were taking on for the money. It was about it was something to do with either a strong interest in the nature of the business, or frankly, in the case of a couple that were there, to give a little bit back, without a doubt. The other thing that shone through as well when we went through this process of the appointment was the attraction of some individuals that were already on the board, and they thought, well, this is a serious board and this does mean business. So that was pretty interesting observations on my part when we went through the last process. I mean, I have to say, and I'm not saying this because of the conversation about directors' fees or whatever, but you have got an outstanding board
they are.
at this airport company, and if you compare the calibre of what you've got and where they sit in business nationally, you cannot do better.
So how many? It's probably a bit beyond where you could answer, but how many boards are these people on, roughly?
Quite a few boards. Look, I don't have the numbers. The annual report for the airport company has a register which shows all of their other directorship holdings and so forth. So they have quite a number of boards.
Okay, and are there any major fish hooks coming up because they've got through a pretty tough property cycle?
Correct.
That they had to do, and they've pretty much solidified where we want to go directionally.
Very much so.
Are there any tough things coming up that?
Look, every business is tough.
Yeah.
And even in the good times, things are tough. So I wouldn't put my finger on any particular issue that's coming up for that business. It will always be a very sensitive business in terms of its bottom line profitability. Airports aren't profitable in their own right. You've got to make money out of other things in order to allow you to do the aviation work. So that's where the property arm and the retail activity that they do is so important.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Dave. Oh, sorry.
You just go to the company's office, and every directorship that every person's on is listed. It's just all there, so online. Thank you. It's not protected information.
No.
Oh, good.
No. Dave.
Yeah, the annual turnover, or let's say revenue and expenditure, I know they're roughly the same. Do you know what that is off the top of your head?
Oh, look, sorry, I don't have that information.
Rough?
I wouldn't want to guess. Look, it's not high. I mean, it's not. But
just to interrupt. We do, and I'm not trying to stop your questioning, but we do have a process whereby we do all this, this gets all reported to us. Now, I know probably none of us can remember quite the numbers that they were, but so there's a process whereby every 6 months we get a 6-monthly report and then an annual report. So it goes through a process if you're looking at performance of the business. So today, and I'm not
looking at performance of business at all.
Okay.
I'm looking at job sizing.
Okay, so is that what the EW report did, didn't it?
So the EW report.
Sorry, and I'm not trying to stop your questioning, David.
Well,
we are veering a little bit off.
Well, another councillor asked questions about what the relativity, relating to the relativity of these fees to other public sector enterprises. So, and the answer was that there was I think a large variation. So I'm trying to establish whether the level of fees has anything to do with the job size. One of the things, not the only thing, involved in job sizing is the turnover of the company, its business size.
Revenue was 8 million.
8 million revenue.
Yeah.
8 million revenue 2016.
But if I may add to that, the revenue and expenditure side is one part of the equation. The other parts of the equation include the complexity of the nature of the business, the strategic value of the business, the value of the balance sheet, which is substantial in terms of how the business is going, the level of risk in operating the business, which once again quite substantial. And I'd add a final part about, if you're looking at business dynamics, the sensitivity of the business. It's a very sensitive business. You can be up or down by 5% and it makes a big challenge to the bottom line. So irrespective of the size of the turnover or level of turnover, there's a lot of other factors that are always taken into account when establishing appropriate director fees.
Well, the follow-up question to that, was that advice given to this council when we appointed these people or at any previous stage, Sean?
Yes, it was in terms of the selection process, just as with the Ernst Young report, we gave them full information on the company. They received the annual reports, had copies of the constitution, so they could once again understand the dynamics of the business and the totality of the director accountability and responsibility.
So have we ever been advised that we should be looking at the director's fee level in the, well, when I say ever, I should clarify that, in the last 10 years? Has that been advice given to this council by yourself or other management?
I'm not aware that we've done so formally to council, but there have been a lot of discussions from time to time that at some stage these fees need to be reviewed.
Well, you said a lot of discussions at some time. Can you clarify that?
Yeah, certainly.
But just remember, Dave, up until this term, this stuff went through the CCO subcommittee.
Yeah, I'm aware of.
So you won't have some of those things. The full council won't have had full clarity of the CCO reports, but you won't have been involved.
That's actually incorrect when you say up until this council. The only correct part is if you said for the last 6 years, that would be close to accurate. But prior to that, they also went to the full council. So. Your statement wasn't correct. In the first 4 years of the 10 years that we're concentrating on, they went to the full council. And Sean can easily answer that by saying, yes, at such and such meeting, I gave advice to the CCO subcommittee. I'm just trying to find out where this has been said to anyone and why this is. In fact, it follows a question from Councillor Robb basically asking who drove this request.
So if I could just respond to that. When I said it's been discussed before, informally, nothing formal, no formal approaches to council. I mean, bearing in mind we are one shareholder. When we did the recruitment of the directors the last time, I can recall myself and Barry Harris, who was the council CEO at the time, saying, is this a time to review directors' fees? And we agreed not. We have had casual conversation with the chair from time to time, but as I said earlier on, it is for the directors to actually make a proposal or recommendation to their shareholders, and they have up until this point said no, the time's not right yet, but I think they're feeling that it is now. So nothing formal at all, but there's always been a question mark when is the time going to be right?
Well, you said there's always been a question mark, but the only evidence you've given, Sean, is a discussion between yourself and the previous CEO.
Correct.
Has it ever been raised? And this is
No,
my question.
not that I'm aware of.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm giving you notice of an amendment that I'm going to make to the motion, which I'll just give to Amy.
Okay, there are no further questions. Can we just put up the staff recommendation? And just to be clear, there is a slight change to what's written in your, certainly in your written agendas. It's clearly marked up there. The word under has just been deleted. Now we have so I'll move that. Mallet, Bunting.
Okay. I'm going
And
to
now
move.
we'll have, just give the staff a chance to
Well, I
type
can
up your
say
amendment.
what it is because it's really only a change in amounts with a reference to the percentage. My proposal, proposed amendment is that there be an approximate 3% increase in directors' fees, with the chair going from 34,800 to 36,000, and the directors going from 23,200 to 24,000.
Yeah.
Otherwise the same.
Yes. Okay. So have you got a seconder?
Not yet,
Okay,
but I
right.
mean, they haven't seen it.
Okay,
either.
so Becca's just said we won't put it up until there is a seconder. So
you need a mover and a seconder for your...
Well,
yeah, we've got
hang
to move and second for me. That's me and Mark and I.
Hang on,
I'll second to get on the table to discuss it.
I don't think that ruling's correct anyway, because how can someone see it to see whether they want to second it?
That's not what I meant, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, anyway, thanks.
Chair, can I ask a question?
Yep.
Councillor McPherson, is there any scientific basis for the increase 34.8 to 36 from 23.2 to 24 that you are proposing in the amendment?
I'm not putting any more scientific basis in the amendment itself than there is already there, which is 0, both for the motion and the amendment. But I am going to reference it to some job sizing and market comparison, which I will. I don't think it's proper I do it now. I think I'll do it when we're speaking to the motion.
Okay.
Okay, so just to be clear,
I'm just trying to get an understanding of the motion, but
amendment.
Of the amendment. But if Councillor McPherson wishes to hold that over for his debate, then that's fine. Although, you know, in this case we have had the benefit of being able to read the Ernst & Young report, which does give the market conditions and perhaps a somewhat more scientific basis for how Ernst & Young have arrived at their recommendation.
Yep.
Well, what I would say...
Just hang on, Dave. So we're just going to make sure we know what we're at. So we've got a recommendation, we've got an emotion which has been moved and seconded. We've got an amendment. Are you happy with that amendment is what you say?
No, that's missing part of the sentence.
Okay, we'll tell them what it is.
Well, I've given it to Amy now, but it's got, it specifically refers to an approximate 3% increase in that first line under A.
So approves Waikato Regional Airport.
Of approximately 3%, because it's got a couple of decimal points.
Okay.
Just the wording I've got there, Amy. Increased by approximately 3%, I think it says.
I'll segment so you could have your say.
Can someone drop a pin, please?
What?
See if you can hear it.
Pin or a pun?
I think that's how they got the first increase, was by dropping a pin onto a page somewhere. Came out at 29.34%. That's right, yeah.
So you happy that that's the wording?
Yeah, thanks.
And James, you're seconding?
Yeah, I
Okay.
just want to hear what Dave's got to say.
You could be a little bit more positive. You could be more positive, James.
Okay. Shoot. Who wants to speak?
Well, I think, don't you get the mover of the motion to speak first?
Does it? Go ahead. Yeah, no, I'm very, very comfortable with the research that's done in the EY report, and more importantly than that, I've been involved with this particular board from the time it started back in the last term of council under the CCO subcommittee structure, and in that time they have been extraordinarily compliant in terms of meeting our requirements with regards to the expectations. They have been incredibly open with regards to telling us what they're doing, how they're doing it, the results they're getting, why they're doing. They've been working very well with their subsidiary, Waikato Tourism. And I actually think we have got some and I'm not overly knowledgeable at this, but some of the directors on that board are high-powered players in the game within the country. And, you know, they don't like picking it, but John Spencer and Margaret Devlin certainly are well regarded. I actually think we're getting them on the cheap. The only reason that we're getting them on the cheap, of course, is because the airport is not a big business and can't sustain huge directors' fees. They have trudged away through this for 10 years, not the same ones, obviously, but they are now due some reasonable move up in their fees, and I think the recommendation from Ernst Young is very appropriate. They have just recently advised us that, and don't get too excited about this, that they are considering returning a dividend to the shareholders, which is astonishing, to be honest, given the previous history of the organisation. It is not a big figure, but it is the start of hopefully something that might be useful for the council. But it certainly is a very key indicator that they have got the ship sailing the right way. They are still operating as quote-unquote property developers, but they have got a plan which they're executing, and they are actually executing it. So they are getting deals away, they are getting tenants, and the place is starting to grow. Now that may or may not be just market conditions. There might be, you know, they are in a more favourable environment than has been the case for a while. But I do believe that a heck of a lot of it is due to the ability of the directors that we've got out there. So I am very, very, and you know, I'm as tight as anything when it comes to rate. As a what? Oh. Yeah. So I don't do these things lightly, but these guys have done exactly what we asked them to do, and they've done it on time as required, and they've kept us up to date all the time. So thank you.
Just briefly.
So I've got Dave. Oh, sorry, I've got somehow Mark. Did you?
Oh, I don't mind. Here, where you go.
I just thought it was automatic that we were going to ask that. Look, okay. Firstly, none of my amendment is proposed because the directors have done anything wrong or are not fulfilling the task that we've given them. I've got a lot of respect for the ones of them that I know, and I do know some of them personally, but I think councillors here have to remember a couple of things. One of them is we're a 50% shareholder. that dividend that Gary talked about perhaps coming back to us is going to be reduced by $25,000 to $30,000 as a result of this decision, potentially. Because that's the level of increase, that's half the quantum of the increase, so that's one point. But two, this is a public sector situation. This is not a private sector situation. You can't compare, or you should not be comparing with the private sector here. If you want comparisons, and Rob asked about scientific evidence before, just one that comes to mind is the District Health Board, which is a $1.5 billion turnover company annually. The directors there get paid $24,000 a year. Don't know what the chair is, but it's less than is proposed there. $24,000 a year for a $1.5 billion company. This is an $8 million company. It is small by comparison, not just with the public sector, but also the private sector. There are public expectations you have to manage as well. You saw the comments that came out around the place about the chief executive's salary increase, which amounted to just under 16%. This fees increase for a much smaller job it comes to over 29% for both the chair and the directors. I'm proposing a 3% increase. I believe that it's fair that there is a small increase. I think that that's within the realm of public expectation. It's within the realm of our rates increases. It's higher than the cost of living increases going on at the moment for the last couple of years. I think that would be something that would not get our ratepayers, our shareholders, upset. I think a 29.34% increase in one hit would certainly do that. I think the fact that a request, in fact, I think it was quite unclear as to exactly how this increase eventuated. I don't think the General Manager was clear on that to us. It's obvious we've got a letter in front of us from the board, but what was before that, I'm not clear on, and I don't believe all the councillors are clear on. I think that it's the wrong time, it's the wrong amount, it's the wrong signal. And I think we have to, if we're going to be taken seriously by the community when we're talking about the sorts of increases that we may be seeking in terms of rates and other revenue from ratepayers and from the city, we have to show that we're also cutting our costs in other areas. And this is sending, I'm sorry, exactly the wrong signal. I think a small, manageable increase is deserved and would not get the public upset with us for no good reason. This increase, I believe, will. Thanks.
Mark.
Thank you. I hate coming on after you, Dave. I really do. I just need to just pick up on one point to re-emphasise the difference between other, recent more public pay rises that have somehow crept into the media and this one. First of all, this is the first one after 10 years. So this is a 29% pay rise after 10 years, and it gets them on par. I agree with Gary that we're getting them on the cheap, these directors, for what they are doing. They have done a formidable job. We're lucky to have a stellar lineup of directors, and I fully support them. But bear in mind, we're not actually being asked to pay them an extra 29% ourselves. We're asking them, as the board, to make the decision on what they are allowed to pay themselves. Or no, that doesn't sound right either. But yeah. We're asking, yeah, it does actually, doesn't it? Rewind, having a great day. Yeah, I am a little bit concerned about, we need to keep our eye on clause B there, because it kind of says, look, I'm comfortable with it, but I just foreshadowing we need to just keep an eye on it. About the terms, we're stating a term, unless we don't, basically, that's all it says. It doesn't say exceptional circumstances to extend the term or to shorten the term. So it's a little bit grey, but I'm quite comfortable knowing the personnel we've got in there and knowing the structure we've got in there. That will be fine, but I'd just like to bring that to people's attention. But really, it is quite an insignificant thing we're doing in a way, in that it is after 10 years. They are very, very good at what they do. It brings them in line, and but I certainly wouldn't be supporting another 29% next year. Let's put it that way.
Sorry, Rob.
Thanks, Chair. Look, I'm supporting the motion, and if you look at page 133, you'll see there that this is an $8 million turnover company with $64 million worth of assets. In my view, to compare this business with the DHB is completely wrong. We have a business here which is competing in the real market out there. The DHB, of course, is a public sector business which derives all of its billions of dollars pretty much from one source, and that's from the taxpayer. So I think that comparison between the DHB and this business totally invalid. It's fair to say in New Zealand that we do have variable abilities in New Zealand company directors, but the abilities of the current directors, which are well known to me, and I believe that they represent value to the fledgling airport business in New Zealand. Councillor McPherson has a recent knowledge of the airport industry and perhaps more involvement in that industry than I have, and I'm quite disappointed that he's not seeing the opportunities that currently exist around the world and in New Zealand on the increasing airport passenger traffic. So, you know, there's a bit more to this job than just managing the finances and managing the airport. It's also that outward-looking approach that we would expect from dynamic directors to make sure that New Zealand is taking advantage. To ensure that the local airport is taking advantage of business opportunities that will be there for the benefit not only of the airport but also of this region. So it's a 10-year increase. To limit it to 3% just doesn't make sense to me. If councillor pay rates had gone up by 3% over 10 years, there probably wouldn't be many of you sitting around this table.
Well, not the quality of people anyway, would it?
Well, probably the two go hand in hand, Gary. Thank you.
Jeff.
Thank you, Gary. Yeah, I'll be supporting the motion. What was I going to say? Sorry, just had a blank as well. It is a 10-year raise, and I don't think it should be a 10-year exercise, so I'd like to see it done more regularly. It shouldn't be happening that way. But I think this is a good board, and I've seen some dud boards over the years. I can remember a chairman 15 to 20 years ago of the airport authority who every time I rang him up as a reporter he'd slam the phone down the moment he heard my voice. He didn't...
I can understand that.
Subjective call, Jeffrey.
No. He thought he wasn't accountable to the public or to the councils, to his shareholders, and he was. And so it was a dud board, and he was a dud chairman. He was a shocker. And the results were terrible as well. And so what I've seen from the CEO and this board is completely the opposite. I think they are doing a good job. I think in terms of there's a real focus with this board that I haven't seen before. I've watched their work with the destination cafe that they've set up and some of the other work there, and in particular the way they're using the land holdings that they've got there. And I think at last we've got it pretty close to right. And so I'll be supporting it, and happy to do so.
Andrew.
So my understanding is that 90% of airports around the world lose money, and this airport has always lost money until recently, and this board is following the instructions that we've given it, and that's basically to hold the fort and to break even, and they're doing better than that. So until we give them different instructions, they'll continue to do what they're doing and doing well. I think that this airport is actually a jewel in the crown for Hamilton City Council. It owns 50% of it, and I think it's something that long term will become a real asset to offsetting rates for our city, as long as a future council doesn't put it on the market and sell it. So I really do think for some of the councils up here, and Port of Tauranga has done for councils who own shares in that. This is a real opportunity long term for this council to bring in extra revenue, and I think we need to treasure it, we need to look after it in the meantime, even although we're not really pushing it to become international now. The opportunity will come, and when it does come, it'll be an opportunity we can't turn down. So I'm supporting the motion. I believe the directors are doing a good job, and it's been a long time since we've reviewed their remuneration. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Martin.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a very healthy debate, and in the previous term of council, I'm not detracting from the good work you did in your team in that.
I would never have taken it that
subcommittee and committee room 1, which I found out about and occasionally would go and hear about. But good governance is that, as I always pressed for, good governance is we're having this discussion of the committee of the whole of this council. So as directors ourselves, we are having this conversation and making a decision as a complete team, and I think that's excellent. So that underscores the very good governance system we now have back. I'm going to defer to I acknowledge the sincere viewpoints of Councillor McPherson, but in this case I'm going to defer to the very wise words of our Mayor and Councillor Pascoe. I think on balance, and Councillor Mallett, I think on balance, well, all of you really, apart from, I think on balance, this is the right way to go. Trying to keep... No. I'm just trying to...
You haven't offended anyone
well,
today,
I'm far kinder to that councillor than he is to me on the river plan and things like that. But anyway, I'm just saying that objectively I do agree that I think that this current team at the airport have done a really good job. This is a very key strategic asset. This is, if you like, a 10-year bump, and that's it. And I mean, obviously from here on in it would be CPI or whatever, but I think if we can avoid these kind of discussions and debates in the future, but it is a very strategic asset, and we want the best and the brightest and the best intellectual capacity we can have. We will never go back to the days, and believe you me, if I heard of a chair slamming the phone to a responsible member of the media, that person, as a shareholder, I would be raising that to have that person removed. So that kind of approach, because in the end, this is a company that is not just accountable to us as the representative of the shareholders, it's accountable to the shareholders at large, and obviously we would expect them, as they do, to engage appropriate skills, and those days are long gone. And the other thing which I stress, and I think the new model we have, which is really good, and I stress this, my observation is historically it was a little bit of an old boys club of who you knew, etc., to be a director. Now that there's a very, from what I can see, and I credit you, Councillor Mallett, in terms of your overseeing of that process too, a very rigorous process that we do go out and seek objectively the best and the brightest to sit on this board. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. And if I can just finish off by putting a little bit of context, the pay rise that they are seeking, as has already been commented, is over a 10-year period, not a 1-year period. And in effect, they're paying themselves. The performance that they have achieved out there has been sufficient to still run the business at a small profit after paying their new salaries. And there's a suggestion of a small dividend payout, of which we'll get 50%. So, but don't expect that to be paying for too much. It'll be a small dividend, but at least they're cash flow positive now, so that's fantastic. So I will put the amendment to the vote. So I think we'll use the voting mechanism. So please vote for or against the amendment.
The amendment is lost. 2 for, 9 against.
Thank you. I'll now put, so we have to clear our boards, don't we? I'll now put the motion, so please vote for or against the motion.
The motion is carried.
Thank you. Okay, we're now moving into the pink. Okay, so we'll have smoker now, eh?
We might get through it. It depends how long. It's only the debtors report to go.
Okay, all right. David suggests we might be able to get through the whole thing now rather than having a cup of tea.
Suggesting the debtors report is the only thing there, unless there's a big conversation to be had.
All right, well, I'll move that we move into public excluded. Mallet, Bunting, those in